is also showing up a lot in how you lead and how you manage.
I'm super excited for what that means for my daughter.
Is going to light you up, to keep you excited, to get you out of bed in the morning, right?
I know what we do. I think we do it incredibly well.
Welcome back to another episode of I Can Fit That In. I am Erin Coop, your host. I am here today with an awesome guest who is in the commercial real estate industry that I was once in. Rob Naso is managing partner and head of U.S. asset management at BGO, where he leads strategy and execution in real estate equity capital formation. Known for his leadership and transparent approach, he has been recognized historically as one of commercial real estate's best bosses. He's also a mentor and an active contributor to the Goldie Initiative, a platform committed to advancing diversity and mentorship in commercial real estate. Rob, welcome. Glad you're here.
Great to be here, Erin.
Thank you. So you have obviously had a remarkable journey in the field of commercial real estate, and BGO serves, interests of hundreds and hundreds, over 700 institutional clients with almost, is it 90 billion assets under management?
I think it's 89.
89. I mean, I rounded up. Shame on me. But obviously, given those numbers and, the amount of money that you're managing, that's very high stakes, high pressure. I'm sure that there's so much pressure to perform every single day, not just on you, on your entire organization. So how do you personally manage to stay consistent and stay calm throughout what has been a tumultuous several years, and also just all the change and uncertainty coming at you?
It was funny. I think, and I forget, I love quotes, but there's a quote that says pressure is a privilege. And it is. I think the more years experience you have, the more that you've seen, the more gray hair that you have or lack of hair. I mean, the more things that you've been a part of, right? And I think for us, for what we're doing, I would tell you that I very much focus, and I ask our team to focus on taking care of the things that they control, right? And making sure that you're turning around letters of intent timely, making sure that you're going out and talking to as many tenant rep brokers as possible, making sure that your marketing materials look pristine, there's no errors there, high quality product. All the kind of simple, it sounds simple, but kind of basic blocking and tackling that, that's what we can control. Right. And the ability to engage and interact and be intentional with the conversations that we have, the meetings that we have. And we really try to canvas a lot of ground, whether that's property managers, leasing agents, tenant rep brokers, tenants themselves. Right. I think, again, being in the middle of a very large and diverse U.S. portfolio really opens the door for you to have a lot of different discussions with a lot of different people. Again, you can be all over the place, or you can try to be a bit more targeted. And we've really tried to instill in the team an ability to get in front of the right people at the right time to talk about the right things. It's not easy. I think, again, we don't ask the junior people to eat the stress that they have. I mean, it's always comforting to see when people are living, eating, and breathing, what they're doing at work. But again, pressure is a privilege, and stuff flows uphill. And so we always tell people that, look, if you have an issue, if you have a problem, if you need to talk, if you need counsel, just raise your hand, right? And anybody from a senior perspective will jump in and try to help as best we can. And I think as long as they know that you have their back and that, you'll support them, it's actually been a pretty good encompassing experience for us.
I love this. And so, obviously in commercial real estate, relationship building is paramount. And, I know this from my own experience and being a tenant rep broker. But when you think about all the relationships that you have built over the years, sometimes you might have clients that you work with or want to work with that there's just not the right chemistry. Or sometimes, we called it a cast of characters. There'd be a cast of characters on the other side of the table. And you're like, okay, is this really a client or a project we want to work on? What is some advice you have for people who are in producer type of roles, whether they're in insurance, commercial real estate, they're in law? All these fields are very, very similar. What advice do you have for people building relationships and wanting to do so in an authentic manner, where sometimes maybe that chemistry just isn't there, or they're just not aligned?
So look, I think the one thing I've learned, again, having been in the U.S. and then traveled and lived extensively in Asia, is that relationships matter, and they take a real long time to build. I think what's been pretty thematic and consistent across wherever I've been is that counterparties really like to engage with people that they like and that they trust and that they respect. And I think as long as you can kind of hold your head high, and you don't have to always agree with people, but if you can disagree and lay out your position and why in a cogent discussion and argument, like to me, that's incredibly meaningful, right? And sometimes you'll just end up being disconnected, and that's fine. But I think you don't have to be harsh in how you treat somebody. You don't have to win, and they have to lose. And I think, I can't tell you how many people that I met when I was a kid, 24 years old, starting out as an analyst that I still work with and are some of my closest and dearest friends in commercial real estate today. I mean, I trust them implicitly. Well, what they tell me, like I know they're not going to lie to me. They'll tell me, what they think and why, and the ability to pick up a phone and get a last look on something, or to get really good transparency as to where we need to be on a transaction in order to make it, or to even know that that deal is not even really a deal that's ours, right? And they'll be that transparent so that we're not wasting time. I think it's been an absolutely incredible run, for me across wherever I've been. And what I've always found is what's very common, I think, across the board is that there's a lot of normalcy in people that are in commercial real estate. I had a longtime partner years and years ago, Bill Garrity, from California, who once said to me, Rob, what I love about real estate. And I said, well, what's that, Bill? He said, it's the land of the B student. and it's different today. There are obviously valedictorians that find their way into real estate today, but I think at its core, what he said made a lot of sense. Whether you're in brokerage and you're a deal maker and you're just, trying to put things together, you have to touch a lot of bases to make deals happen and get transactions done and completed. And how you relate to people, how you negotiate with them, how you treat them, like it's incredibly meaningful. And I can't tell you how many people that I've worked with or sat against at a table negotiating against. I mean, we have a great story here. One of our MDs, Ishan Wang, who was at JP Morgan in Shanghai, who I actually sold a project to and negotiated against, and really just I loved the way she negotiated. And we actually ended up hiring her here, right? When she was looking to leave China after COVID. We hired her here because she's just a force, right? She's incredibly switched on, sense of urgency, which you love to see in people was second to none. So things like that are incredibly meaningful to me.
Yes, I get that completely. Now, you and I have something in common that when we first connected a few months ago, we touched upon, which is the fact that we were both, early in our careers, people who were surrounded by Ivy Leaguers and dealing with some of those imposter tendencies of looking around going, gosh, I'm not like you. Like I'm not cut from that cloth. I didn't come from that pedigree. And so you went to University of Scranton. And how would you say that your experience early in your career with that sort of imposter tendency, that mindset of, wait a minute, I'm not like these people. How did that actually shape you? And what did you learn from it ultimately?
Yeah, so look, again, my dad was a school teacher who had gotten kicked out of college and was a mailman as he went to night school to become a teacher. My mother was a stay-at-home mom who came from a really poor family in Liverpool, England, right? Both of my grandparents on her side grew up in orphanages. So I think when you grow up with not a lot, you have a hunger that other people just don't have. And again, I'm with my wife and I go through this all the time, with my kids now, and my daughter is applying to college, and she is smarter than I was back in the day. She works just as hard as I did back in the day, and she does better, way better than I did. And so you only want the best for them, right? And I just laugh at the amount of discussions we have with her because I look at the class of universities and colleges that she has an opportunity to potentially attend. And it was way better than what I was able to do coming out of high school. I mean, again, I worked super hard and I got B pluses. Like it just, that was my lot in life, right? And I think, for me, I was incredibly lucky to go to the University of Scranton. I think, again, the fact that I got into a college was a win for my dad. He didn't know anybody, couldn't pull any strings, had no clue about business. And the fact that I got into a school was a win for him. And, I got out of Scranton and I remember when, I graduated in 92, I was in the accounting club. I was an accounting major that hated accounting. And, again, not that I knew it at the time, but I got rejected by every big six accounting firm, which in hindsight is arguably the best thing that ever happened to me. I didn't want to be an accountant. I didn't want to do audit. But it gave me some good basics, to understand financial statements. And I did a couple year stint as an accountant, really managing expenses for Prudential Securities, and luckily found into an asset manager or an analyst role that was part of their program at the time, which again just opened up a million doors of opportunity for me. And then what I always like to say now is kind of where you go to undergrad does not determine your future. And for me, that really was buckling down, being the first in the office, last to leave. And then, Prue sponsored me for my executive MBA program at NYU, which again was a life-changing experience. And that in turn gave me confidence. So to your point, when I ended up interviewing at Morgan Stanley, it was an incredible experience just to go through the rigorous interview process. And then once I got there, to your point, it seemed like every person on that floor was an Ivy League educated individual. And then again, I think the more that you spent time there, it was great. Like I loved the culture. I loved the sense of urgency, focusing on getting things done the right way. It all made a lot of sense for me. But I found pretty quickly that if you knew what you were doing in real estate, like you could fit in. You had to open your mouth, you had to gain your footing, and you had to gain confidence, but you could participate in every senior level meeting there and open your mouth and contribute. And to me, I met a whole bunch of super interesting, high powered, people that I worked with, both on the investing and the banking side, some people that I have an incredible amount of respect for because they were the best in their field at that job. And it just made me think about things very differently than what I had grown up with, in a different firm. So, that to me was kind of right time, right place for, a kid that was probably in his early 30s when I went there. And again, I didn't grow up as an analyst. I didn't work till 2 a.m., as an investment banking analyst, but I came in as a VP and kind of hit the ground running and loved every minute of it.
Yeah. And with all those really, I would say, insightful experiences that you just shared, you're clearly an optimist and you put these posts out on LinkedIn all the time, daily, about the glass is half full. And so, how have you stayed grounded and motivated throughout all of this urgency that you've been surrounded by and that you've also really ingrained yourself into and that you enjoy? But also, I'm sure at times can be quite draining because it's hard to always be on, right? And to be constantly dealing in those high stakes environments. So, how do you stay grounded personally and how do you stay motivated?
I think when you come from humble beginnings, it's a lot easier to stay grounded, um, and switched on and motivated, right? Again, it's today I work hard as hell for my kids, right? You only want the best for them. But to me, coming out of an environment where, I didn't grow up in country club environments, I didn't, fly on vacation. We took the family station wagon and drove 6 hours or 7 hours up to Vermont, right, for a
Yeah.
weekend or stuff like that.
Hey, I went to the
And
Ozarks, so I would
yeah,
take Vermont over that.
no, exactly. But again, like I think instilling in my kids, the reality of what so many other people do in terms of how they live, so that you don't take things for granted. And to me, I can't tell you. Like there was two times in my life that I didn't like my job. And I ended up quitting both times. And I'm up at 4:30 in the morning, and I am really super energized to get to work. Like I thoroughly enjoy kind of the push and pull that we have here. I enjoy kind of dealing with The people that I work with, because they're just super bright, super switched on. I would tell you there's no asshole personalities here, right? I think, it's a collaborative place. There's a lot of super intelligent people. And if that's the environment where, your senior managers support you, and again, I go back now over 20 years with both Sonny Kelsey and John Carrollfield, the two co-CEOs that we have. I know, and I don't take for granted, the long leash that they let me have to kind of run the asset management execution oversight of the U.S. business. And again, I think we're trying a lot of things. We're trying to be entrepreneurial. We're trying to be quick. We're trying to be thoughtful and creative, not overly so, but in the context of trying to be commercial to get things done. And I think when you're given that kind of leeway to do things and operate, like that's incredibly powerful. And for me, where I'm at in my life and my career, like again, to me it's a great place to come. It's there's a lot of super energy here on the floor every single day, and whether it's on leasing or loan modifications or marketing or just pure asset management execution, like there's a lot of different discussions that we get into that make it really, really worthwhile. And, I kind of give, in turn, a lot of people poetic license to kind of think through things and figure out what we should do and why. And, we kind of try to run things like we would a bit as a company. Like if you look at the industrial vertical, it's held across a bunch of different fund vehicles. But when you consolidate it, it's massive. And if you try to really be uniform in terms of kind of marketing materials and quality materials and messaging, all of that stuff is accretive at the end if you can do that. And that to me gets me super excited. I mean, I always laugh because to me, I've never actually thought about myself competing against somebody else. It's me making sure that I'm doing the best I can every day against my former self. Like if that was my, yesterday person or whatever, like to me, I've always thought of it like that. I've never thought about competing against the head of asset management or another firm. Like I know what we do. I think we do it incredibly well. I think we focus on the details. We focus on relationships. We focus on people. And I think that has a lot of good outcome that comes of it if you do it right. And we're not always correct and we're not always getting it 100% right, but we try, right? And
Right.
that's to me, like if you can do that. And again, there'll be things I think, when we met with, we spent a bunch of time with Sonny, I think it was back in 2020 now, and we talked about prop tech where we had no exposure at all. And one of my colleagues here, Neil Erdem, was one of the founders of Tishman's innovation group, and he basically tasked us to figure out kind of how we could start making progress on prop tech. And we came back and made recommendations to invest, have the firm invest into 4 different VC funds, which we did, and then he gave us license to work with each of those portfolio companies. I mean, one of the biggest lessons we learned was having talked to so many different groups about prop tech and how they set it up. I mean, there's a lot of people that set up subcommittees about reviewing things. And I said, I don't want any part of that. Like Anil is very well equipped to figure out and deal with all of these counterparties. And then we kind of test pilot everything and anything. And if it doesn't work, we just turn it off. Right. And if it does work, we get a ton of benefit. And so like operating under that kind of context, like to me, that's just incredible. And again, that's a big reflection, I think, on kind of how Sonny manages and kind of, the discretion that he let us run with, which again, makes you feel really great when you work for people like that.
Right. And I imagine some of that ability for you to internalize the autonomy that you're given and to compete solely against yourself from yesterday is also showing up a lot in how you lead and how you manage. So you've earned this best boss title. What is it that you think earned you that the most? Because clearly you're a great leader, but what is it that people really enjoy most about your leadership style, would you say?
Well, you're very kind, Erin. Well, thank you. I would tell you, and it's funny, I heard another thing this weekend about one of the biggest strengths that you can have is the ability to manage your emotions.
Yeah.
Again, people can get overly emotional. And I think one of my best traits is the ability to be level-headed, right? And there's another saying that this too shall pass. All these good things happen, and they will pass. All the bad stuff that happens, it's going to pass. And I think if you kind of keep level-headed and figure out kind of the way forward, or what you should be doing or what you should be thinking about. Like, and again, I spent a ton of time doing business in India and China. And I always tell people, doing business in the US is nothing compared to doing business over there, where, you have to go through interpretation, you have to go through translation. There's a lot of pomp and circumstance, cultural learning, a lot of listening, which again, I think has been incredibly helpful, for me in a learning environment to figure out how to deal with and manage and work with people, right? I think
Yeah.
it's been incredibly helpful to just think about things and why you're doing what you're doing, the people that you work with. And again, what turns me on and what motivates me is not what motivates other people, right? And if you have colleagues or people that are motivated by spending more time with their family, but they're phenomenal in their job, then you figure out, how to make that work. And we do. We have an incredibly diverse group of colleagues that are here now, and they're not all the same, right? And
Right.
they're all different. They all have different needs and wants and desires and expectations, and kind of just having a discussion with them to talk through some of that stuff is incredibly enlightening. And again, I laugh because my soon to be 18 and 16-year-old have a very different view of the world and will tell me how not cool I am, which I could care less. But they think of things very differently, and to listen to how they think about politics and what's happening in the world, and the release of the hostages in Israel, like all of these things are super, super interesting from a teenager perspective, right? And
Right.
they're not getting their data and knowledge from the 6 o'clock evening news like I used to, right? They're, whether it's on TikTok or whatever they're looking, Instagram. It's a whole different paradigm and information learning process that they go through, which I just find incredibly interesting.
Yeah, definitely. So I know that diversity is really important to you, and you have this huge role with the Goldie Initiative. Can you talk a little bit about what you hope to, um, how you hope to impact and leave a legacy on the next generation of leadership?
Sure. So it's funny. So people, they're to each their own. Whatever they do with their free time, God bless them. I travel a lot for work. I like to say that I spend the other time at home, right? And sometimes it seems like now I'm a glorified taxi driver, right? Whether I might not be able to spend a lot of time with my kids because they have their own plans. The fact that I can just drive them somewhere, and they're both getting their licenses now, so that'll end soon too. But I think kind of seeing my daughter as an 18-year-old next month, and looking at her applying for colleges and thinking about the world that she will enter, the workforce that she'll enter, in 5 years' time, will be a very different experience for her than it was, when I entered. And I think, when you look at women, there's another great quote that says, you can have it all. You might not just be able to have it all right now, right? And so you have to kind of plan and be nimble and think about how you're going to try to navigate, family life and work life and getting balance and all that kind of stuff. And so I think when the Goldie Initiative was originally made of interest to me, or available to me as a mentor, I jumped at it because I thought it was interesting. Again, I had heard of Goldie. I had asked my friends in Chicago, developers, partners, et cetera, because she's a much better known commodity in Chicago than she was in New York. And a lot of people know her there. And then I went to the first gala event that they had, and I think there was 1,000 people. And honestly, I was like, oh my God, like this is way bigger than I expected. I thoroughly enjoyed being able to engage with, I can't say kids, with young women that were, MBA students that were looking to have mentorship. And, how did you handle this situation? Or what did you do here? Or do you know somebody that does this? And to be able to be overly generous with your work history, and or your Rolodex was very easy for me. And again, so I think looking at all these high-powered women that I could engage with and try to help in some way was great. And then I just looked at all the high-powered women that we have that work here. I mean, there are a lot of women in very senior positions at BGO that are very impactful. And I think to me, when you look at kind of that crop of young women that is growing up, that is going to get put into senior decision-making positions throughout real estate, it's awesome. Like, and again, so I'm super excited for what that means for my daughter. I'm super excited for what it still means for my son. Because again, the thing I love about real estate, again, it's not rocket science, and they both seem to like it. They both seem to potentially have an interest in it. We'll see, how that unfolds. I have a couple of nephews that are potentially keen in it as well. And what I laugh at is it's a career that really didn't have any notoriety when I was in college. I didn't even know what a commercial real estate career could look like, and so I kind of hammered them about just being interested and putting yourself out there and interviewing and going to talk about or going to talk to all of these different real estate firms that are doing a lot of super really interesting things. And it's all over the country. I mean, everything whether you go to eat at a restaurant or you go to an office building or you're storing goods in a warehouse,
Right.
like it's all real estate related, and it's incredible when you look at the global reach of everything that we do and supply chain movements and how customers order things and where do people live and where do people work, and I mean it's all changing so quickly now in terms of amenitization post COVID. So I mean there's just so many different things to think about. And then what I think I find super interesting is the confluence of not only bricks and sticks real estate, but then tech. And then, what are you doing to be incredibly efficient on the P&L? What are you doing to provide a good basket of services to your clients, to your tenants, to your residents? Like it's great. Like there's a lot of different things to talk about and think about, and hopefully, at the end of the day, you're providing the best mousetrap as possible to get the best number of tenants or residents that you can.
Right. I love this so much. And I wanted to shift for 1 second and ask you as we close out, a lot of the work that I do has to do with making the corporate world a better place by helping the people in it. Because I don't think that corporate or business is bad. In fact, I love business and I've always loved corporate and I still play in that space. But sometimes people can make it bad. And so, what would you say from a workplace perspective are some of the things that you think leadership in large organizations needs to pay attention to? And I love the fact that you talked a little bit about emotions, managing emotions. I teach grown adults to do this because, yes,
Mhm.
we are creatures of emotion, not creatures of logic, even though we think that we are just purely logical. We're not. We make decisions based on emotions. But what would you say to that? What would you say about the future of work and where organizational leaders on a large scale need to put their focus at this point?
So again, like I think we spend a lot of time on people. What I also think a little bit more, and I always find it super interesting, is that like you never know where somebody came from, how they grew up, the life experiences that they had. And again, like there's been some times where you'll go into meetings and it's a bad meeting. I think that's kind of how this whole discussion started. And like I'm always willing to give somebody a second chance because maybe they had a bad day, maybe something horrific happened to them that morning. You just never know. But I think, everybody has different desires, different wants, different expectations from life, right? And I think, one of the most important and impactful things that happened to me in my career was going to NYU for my MBA. And that was when, Crew had said, "Hey, if we sponsor you for the executive MBA, will you stay?" And I said, yeah, of course. And again, I went and I didn't go to the finance track at NYU. I ended up going general management, and then I ended up meeting an incredible, group because you stay with the same 55 people throughout the 2 years. And I met some of the most interesting, switched on, dynamic, different people that I ever would have met with. And we had Kevin Jennings, who did a TED Talk, who grew up really poor in Appalachia, ended up putting himself into Harvard, and I think he was the gay son of a Baptist minister, and he told a whole bunch of stories about what life was like growing up, which was impactful to me. I had a guy who worked for NASA who studied black holes, who was just, again, I was a kid, I was like one of the youngest in the class, and a lot of these people were very senior, had been through a lot, were very senior decision makers and managers, and all just very different. Like we had some very Republican people, and we had some very liberal Democrats. And to be a fly on the wall and to be able to listen to the discussions, to me was incredibly enlightening. I think, again, when I lived in Asia for a long time, I came back to the U.S. I didn't have a clue how polarized the U.S. was politically. But I think, at the end of the day, I take a lot of pride in that. Those two kids will always say thank you and may I and please and nice to meet you and look you in the face. And when they're saying hello and shake your hand. And, if you can get the basics done right, that means a lot. And one of the things I've also told people, because, I do a bunch of kind of guest lecturing, and whether that's at the University of Scranton or at Cornell or HBS or any of these places, to me, like when you're interviewing, like take this seriously, right? This is a job that hopefully you're going to enjoy. And I always tell people too, like if you're not happy, like you need to go find something else. Like you spend way too much time and spend too much effort in a job, and if that's not going to provide you happiness, in that sense, like that doesn't work. I mean, I enjoyed every single minute of being here. I love the job that I have, the people that I work with. It couldn't be any better. And again, I laugh because
Yeah.
not knowing what I was going to do coming out of school, like real estate was the perfect outcome that I could have never thought about, right? I mean, we balance
Mhm.
or we juggle a bunch of balls in the air every
Yes.
single day, bouncing around from deal to deal, issue to issue, problem to problem.
Right.
And I think, what's been really, I think important also is the ability to be transparent, and again, I laugh too, because some of the meetings that we have, I've asked, our head of compliance to sit in, and people will look at me like I have three heads and like, why is compliance here? And it's like, nobody did anything wrong. It's really to make sure that we educate them so that they understand all of the blocking and tackling that we're working on in the day to day, what is asset management, so that they understand our business a little bit better. So that when I have to call them about, hey, can we do this? Or what do you think about this? They have some context to make a decision versus just saying no or yes or maybe or, anything like that. And again, that's one of the things I really appreciate here is it's a pretty collaborative place
Yeah.
from the top down. And that's incredibly meaningful.
Yes. And one of the things I took away from what you just said, a couple of things. One is that there's no linear path and there doesn't have to be. But if you're in something that doesn't feel aligned with who you are, if it doesn't light you up in any way, if you're not excited to be there, then figure something else out, right? Doesn't mean you quit your job and just go look for something. Maybe you're looking for something as you're still working, because there is obviously on planet Earth, there's financial responsibilities, but it is your responsibility to find what is going to light you up, to keep you excited, to get you out of bed in the morning, right? So that is definitely something that I know I've experienced and a ton of my listeners have experienced, because life's too short to stay in something that you're miserable doing. And the path does not have to be straight. You can, take a few turns and try different things. So the other thing I really took away from what you said is that, people matter. And when you focus on people, when you focus on their growth, their experience, their development, their journey, because everyone is unique and authentic and deserves to be treated that way, that you're going to have people who want to work hard for you. You're going to have people who
Yeah.
want to give you discretionary effort. And you're going to have people who show up, right? And are ready to roll up their sleeves. And if that's what you want, you've got to treat them like human beings. So I really took that away from a lot of what you shared today. And I'm so thankful that you joined us, shared your awesome insights and your leadership journey with us. It's really remarkable to understand more about you.
Well, Erin, you're very kind. I can't say thank you enough for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.